Aries 30, a duck pond and its brood. So here we have a very ordinary situation where in the animal kingdom, a mother is taking care of her offspring. This is indicative of the aspect of our being which is related to the animal. It is said that the human being is half animal, half angel. And the animal part of us, like any living being, is subject to the 4 imperatives of the gene which wants to reproduce. And its 4 functions are feeding, fight and flight, and sexual reproduction. Now, if we translate this into our society, we see a very similar pattern. Most people are concerned with putting food on the table, putting a roof over their heads, finding a relationship and raising the kids, and the protecting themselves from danger as well. So these are real challenges, real worldly challenges. And to be honest, most people don't do very well. They spend all of their lives concentrating on mastering that animal aspect of being. And the animal kingdom does it a lot better than we do. It's all they do. And yet, there's so much more. That doesn't really give meaning to life. That's just survival. That's just continuing the species. But it doesn't add meaning. What adds meaning to our lives, really, is that we connect with the angelic part, the spiritual side of us. Now, we can see this as philosophical if we want to. If you don't want a God in your life, have a philosophy. That's fine, of course. And then you've got to find a philosopher. And not many of them speak in a way that we can understand, that seems to make sense. You have to go way, way back to the time of Socrates, Aristotle, and Plato to really kind of work out the meaning of life on the absolute level. I would make one exception. Hegel came up with this lovely idea of 3ness. Thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. Push back, and reconciliation. And this is present within every spiritual tradition, this wisdom of 3. And when we have embodied philosophy or spiritual wisdom within our ordinary lives at the same time as making ourselves competent in the world, then we have found that's the springboard for developing human consciousness at the highest level. And most people really have a hard time getting there. So how do we get there? And I think the challenge, if we think about how it was when we were young, we, perhaps at the age of 18 to 21, we were starting to realize that we weren't going to be fed anymore. We weren't going to be given a home anymore unless we worked it out for ourselves. And so we had to come to that decision and that understanding that we need to get sorted. We need to sort ourselves out to find a way to develop worldly competence. And then that's such a struggle for most people, it's such a challenge, that they forget about the whole business of giving meaning to their lives. And if you ask anyone, really, there's a good chance, 80-90% chance, that they're going to say that either their family or their career gives meaning to their lives, apart from those who are already discovered into their faith. It's not that easy to find the meaning to life if you're up against it in a worldly sense. If you're hungry, then the meaning of life is to get food, and so on. So we have to get on top of our worldly situation, even to have a chance to move beyond animal consciousness into angelic consciousness. So it's not at all inappropriate for a teenager to get busy on developing worldly competence. And yet, that is bait to catch you. If you get caught up in that, and you get caught up in either poverty consciousness or greed and self-importance and so on, both of which are very real and present dangers, then you lose the possibility of giving a really profound meaning to life. Because the meaning to life must be more than propagation. It's not enough to just continue something which is meaningless. You have to give it meaning for it to be worth continuing. So what is the meaning in your life? What gives you that sense of, yes, this is what I came to do and I've done very well? If you measure that question in terms of worldly competence, then you're missing the point. The point has to be developed from the soul's perspective, and the soul is not interested in pats on the head from society, fancy cars and posh houses. It's just of no concern to the soul whatever. What is things like responding well to temptation, just not falling into it, but not denying it either, just giving way to it enough, a little bit. Getting involved in an ambitious career, a little bit. Being totally involved in your family until that period of your life is no longer appropriate to be your life. You know, you're not living your kid's life. You know, you're living your own life. And part of what you did was to bring kids into the world, but there's a bigger part. And we start to understand that that bigger part is bigger than all of these concerns, even your children, even your career. That's the part of us that we're looking for if we're on a spiritual path. So, how do we reconcile these two worlds is the mystery of this degree. It's a question, first of all, are we in acknowledgement that there are two aspects of life which seem, on the face of it, to be in polar opposition? Either you're following a worldly decision at the moment or a spiritual one. That's how it seems to most people. Is that how you reconcile it? By having them as competitors to each other? That's not really reconciliation, is it? How do you reconcile to what appears to be opposing forces? And the answer is that you raise your understanding of both of them. When you see that worldly competence is a spiritual quality, and that spiritual awareness is a worldly skill, then, and only then, I think, can you reconcile them. Because when you act in terms of competence and faith, then your life is made smooth. And it's all meaningful. Every bit of it, every moment of it is meaningful. Because in every moment, these two forces, the worldly and the spiritual, are present and in some form of harmony together. Now that harmony may be a dynamic balance. It may be that you move your attention from more in this direction to more in that direction. More spiritual, more worldly, more spiritual, more worldly as a kind of a waveform of your living. And yet, there's a part of you which is not differentiating those two aspects of attention. There's a part of you that can actually see both aspects of life as one and the same thing. So when we're in our human consciousness rather than angelic consciousness, rather than animal consciousness, when we're in the human consciousness, we're in the heart. That's what the heart is. It's the spiritual, worldly meeting point. It's where balance is found. Love which is not worldly is conceptual, really. Love which is not spiritual isn't really love. It's much more selfish. So if you can find a place in your heart where you know that when you are loving, you are acting not only in a spiritual way, expressing compassion, consideration, care and attention, not only those things, but also in a worldly way. In other words, you're smoothing your path through life by expressing and experiencing love. When you know that, then you've answered the mystery of this degree. As the Sufis would have it, a true Sufi has his head in the clouds, and his feet on the earth. In other words, being aware of God as you get on with your worldly concerns.